So, welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co host, Kevin David Cridner. Before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. First, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity, not to win arguments, but to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally, following where authenticity leads us. So pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So we often have these very brief, we try to keep it brief, very brief conversations before we kick this off. So we have some launching pad. Um, Maybe because I like to get straight to the point. I don't know. Which
Maybe.
everybody doubts after they've listened to me on the episode. They're like, wait, what? That's you get. Trust me, you wouldn't want to be around me if I wasn't trying to get to the point. I've had some very interesting experiences this past week around truth telling and conforming to reality. And I think there was this, and we've discussed this theme before. And Kevin, I was telling you before we started the podcast, I think there's this old man syndrome that kind of happens. And it's one of two things. The old man syndrome is you repeat yourself a lot. And there's two reasons. And it's not always clear when you're around an old guy which one it is. The first reason is, well, you're just old and forgetful. Do you remember when? Did I tell you the story about? I can't remember. I've got more interesting things to remember and or to think about, and I'm more interested in holding on to the memory than who I told the memory to. So there's the forgetfulness piece, but then there's also the I've been around the block, not just a couple times, but a couple hundred times or a couple thousand times, and I've seen it all. And at the end of the day, there's only really a handful of things that you really need to know. And I'm just going to repeat myself because humans are forgetful and we need to be reminded. And so hopefully this falls into the latter camp. Um, if it's the former camp, the good thing is we're oblivious to it. So,
Right, right. And don't destroy my illusion.
yes, exactly. Speaking of truth telling, like there is a boundary to the truth telling.
Allow me to live in my illusions.
But prior to us working on the podcast, I think one of the big challenges for me was where you really challenged me was to confront reality head on. And I had lived in such a world that I don't know, like there's so many aspects, so many things that are instilled in us, vision, optimism, ambition, all of these things, which and it's a very interesting things to tease apart, but they can be healthy, but they can also be a an escape from reality. And what I've discovered, I mean, there's this fascinating statement that Jesus makes that we'll know the truth and the truth will set us free. And it's been a fascinating experience for me to understand that God actually lives. I mean, this sounds kind of funny that it's surprising when you say it, but God actually lives in reality.
Yeah,
That's where we find him. And we don't find him in these uh, uh, ignoring reality is falsehood. It's a lie. And why would you
fantasy.
expect to find him there? Go ahead.
No, it just it's fantasy.
It's fantasy.
Yeah. There's a there's a TV show called Ted Lasso. I'm sure people have seen it. And the main character is talking to his therapist at one point. He's confronting reality about the ending of his marriage and panic attacks and that kind of thing. And she makes this statement. She says, that you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. But what people don't tell you, what Jesus doesn't say, is what happens in between those two. It'll usually piss you off or shatter your soul. There will
Yeah.
be some sort of emotional experience between those two that you have to walk through prior to getting to the truth. And maybe that's why we prefer fantasy.
Mhm.
If truth is what is, it's reality. then the fantasy is the avoidance of what is. And I get it. Like, we're not sitting here. I'm not sitting here. I know you're not sitting here. We're not sitting here saying um, that we don't do this.
Right.
We do it
Yeah.
every day. Sometimes just to make life livable. I get it, but it does us no benefit because God's not in those fantasy places. He's in the reality, even in the messiest, nastiest, most painful reality. He's in that reality. And avoiding the reality, I think it's pretty fair to say we're avoiding him at the same time.
I think with that too is there's a grace in this process. Like there's not an expectation that we should be able to, if you're in the middle of, okay, physiologically, we have mechanisms in place to help us deal with experiences that we cannot process. And in the same way, it doesn't mean that if we're not at the point of fully embracing reality, it's less about are you in fantasy or not, as in have you arrived or not, but it's more about are you willing to go on the journey with him and let him guide you out of the fantasy step by step by step by step. And to your point, it's like maybe this is part of what this is a definition. This is not a theological definition, but maybe this is a, and maybe it is, definition of sanctification is Christ leading us out of fantasy into truth and um, and opening our eyes so that we can see. I mean, there's Jesus makes the statements that of people who have ears but don't hear, who have eyes but don't see. What is that besides the denial of reality, besides living in fantasy? And
Yeah,
his invitation was, please listen, but they wouldn't.
right. And even affirms those, in the Sermon on the Mount. I think it's in Matthew 7, 6 or 7. Um, he even encourages us to ask, seek, knock. And to those who ask, they will be given answers. To those who seek, they will find. To those who knock, the door will be opened. Um, like, he encourages us to do that, to be curious, to ask questions. And to me, that sanctification, that discipleship, looks like step by step by step walking through the desert and then out of the desert. You see it with the disciples. Like we like to say, doubting Thomas, right? I'm not going to believe it till I can put my fingers in his wrists, feel the nail holes. And I think he's gotten a pretty bad rap. But think about how much anxiety, how much fear was surrounding that. Like, he just lost God, and his life has been shattered and destroyed. And then somebody comes around saying, he's back.
Right.
I don't know if I would have reacted any differently than Thomas. I don't know. I so badly want that to be true. But I saw him. I saw him die. I saw him be put in that tomb. And I have to suspend my senses in order to understand. Because what I saw, I know what I saw, and it doesn't make sense. So, how can you come out of that any other way than step by step by step? What you're developmentally ready for. I don't think there's any other way. And yet we shame the lack of perfectionism in ourselves and in each other. And we all say that it's a process, that I'm growing to become more and more like Jesus. But when it becomes really apparent, I'm not like Jesus, is there a celebration? or is there
Hmm.
condemnation?
Wow. Because if you frame it, is this not repentance fundamentally? Okay, you can. Here's a fun little thing. Repentance itself is never the goal. The goal is conformance to reality, and repentance is only necessary when you're living in fantasy. So, to your point, is there not joy in heaven when one sinner embraces the reality that Jesus is God and we are not Him?
Right.
So, why, to your point, why the condemnation? Why not the
Right.
celebration that we're finally found the truth?
Right. And that word that's pronounced or that's translated repentance is metanoia, which essentially means change your thinking. I've been living in fantasy. My mind has been focused in this direction. So start slowly shifting towards what's reality. And for any of us, I think if we're brutally honest, to change your thoughts on something is really, really hard.
Well, and I think it's useful to most people probably wouldn't consider this to be vulnerable. It feels a little vulnerable to me, but one of the things I've been confronted with repeatedly over the last number of months, and again in the last couple of weeks, I had a conversation with my wife last night, and she was asking me questions about some client projects I'm working on, and I started going deep down the rabbit holes of accounting and accounting systems and different types of analyses and tracking that we're doing and other types of stuff like that. And I just said, I feel really weird being this guy who loves accounting. Like, what sane person, like, really, like, let's be honest, like, who, who thinks? To me, it's like this numbers are an incredible window into what's going on under the hood. And that's what I see. Um, Plus, there's just something joyous to me about the rhythmic, systematic process of how these things function. And she's like, "Yeah, you've always gotten really excited about when you're talking about some of these accounting stuff." I'm like, "But I don't want to be, the honest admission is I don't want to be that guy. Like,
Right.
can I please just be, I don't know, like can it be this other guy?" And you and I have had many conversations. You've watched me try to be many other kinds of people. There's some kind of need that's often attached to the identities that we assume, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves, about the world. We're clinging to them for safety. Um, and there is this act of vulnerability to say, I've been clinging to this way of thinking, to this way of seeing myself, to this way of being perceived, and I'm willing to lay it down and to be. And maybe the hard work is that once you lay it down, there's another layer deeper than that that you have to be confronted with and deal with. So
Right.
I, I used to have this little shtick as a kid where I would go off about how the use of the term closet, and the closet is basically where you take all your stuff, you shove it in, and then you closet and you move on. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's kind of this fear. If I open the closet door a little bit, all this stuff that I've shoved in there comes tumbling out. And am I going to be capable of dealing with whatever comes out of there?
Right. Right. Hmm. There's all sorts of subjective realities, right? For all of us, based on our context, our experiences, our interactions with people, our learning, our, everything that makes us us. It creates a subjective reality. And maybe subjective realities lead us to false eternities. Like I have the subjective reality of this is how things are and how they should be, and I'm insisting that it's this way because it's leading me to this eternity, this outcome, this
Mhm.
arrival destination,
Yeah.
because I want to be there so badly. Like I think of the disciples, how badly did they want to spend the rest of their lives walking around with Jesus doing what they were doing? 3 years, a long time of them walking. Um, what they call it, being covered in the dust of your rabbi. You're always walking behind, you're always watching, you're always hearing, you're listening, you're using all your senses, everything's together, you're there. 3 years of that. And it would be a different thing if it was 3 years walking behind you, seeing
Come
what you
on.
do.
You're kidding me, right? You're putting me to, no, just kidding.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
right.
joking.
And it'd be very different if it's me or you or anybody else. It's a very different experience. I'm not
It
saying
is.
it's not a valuable experience. I'm just saying it's a different experience.
Sure it is.
But they're seeing him do these things, have these conversations. He's there for them to ask questions. And so I get the resistance, right? When he starts saying, hey, he's preparing them, hey, we're going to Jerusalem and I'm going to die there. I get the resistance of like, no, 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 you can't. Uh-uh, you can't. What do you do with that? They had this false eternity in their mind. Yes,
I'm
we're
re
getting the chart.
I'm ready this time. I'm ready this time for the chart. We got the chart. Um,
Yeah,
so if you have, here's what I'm saying. And if you wanted to, so if you have, in reality, we should put the past on here as well. But if you look at for those of you listening, if you look at a horizontal axis of past, present, and future, and the vertical axis between fantasy and reality, but what you're describing here is that the future, hope in a future, is one of the most powerful motivators, whether it's a carrot or a stick. If you don't do X, Y, or Z, you will end up broke and alone and
in
um,
hell.
yeah, exactly. Or if you do this, you will be in some kind of heaven. And this fundamentally is the foundation of all sales and marketing,
Right.
right? Evangelism is another word for sales and marketing, in my opinion. Um, so then the question is, sales and marketing and evangelism are neutral, inherently neutral. The question is what you're selling a grounded in reality or fantasy? So I have a fairly painful story of investing in a business mentor with a heaven that was founded in fantasy. Um, and and you yield some of the outcome, high degrees of trust going into the relationship, fully expected a different outcome. He and I both. We're here. It's clear that somewhere along the line, something went off the rails. It's not clear to me that we've fully gotten to the root, but what is clear is that there was elements of these that the advice ultimately was founded in fantasy. How do you know? Because we've transpired from the present into the future, and we've looked at the outcome, um, at least at some level. I've also recently um, watched a different scenario where another individual made very compelling, uh, persuasive advice to um, to a business owner, and It was simply the logical conclusion of the facts. Here's where you are. If these don't change, this is what's going to happen. And you can embrace it or deny it, but this is a train wreck. There's a train that's coming, and if nothing changes, there's going to be a train wreck.
Yeah.
And that's a like there is hell coming. It doesn't mean that we're going to force you to do anything. It doesn't, and it was true, and the person recognized it to be true. So I think part of the skills of discernment, which you only gain through learned experience,
Right.
but part of but a substantial um, skill in discernment is learning to understand, first of all, let's recognize when we're being sold heaven or hell. Let's recognize whether this heaven or hell is actually grounded in truth and reality. And um, well, I mean, maybe it's as simple as that. And so when you understand, and I think what can easily happen is when you start to see how absolutely compelling heaven and hell are from a motivational standpoint, then you
Right.
start to understand how people wield that as a power in persuasion. Um, I came across a recent scenario in which there was a disagreement between a pastor and a a layperson, and things went sideways. There was a disagreement. Things went sideways, and the pastor made a comment to this individual suggesting that perhaps the negative things that they experience was the side effect of God not being on their side because they had gone a different path than the pastor. Um,
Interesting.
Heaven and hell is very persuasive.
Very persuasive. And it has been from the beginning of human experience. Eternal destination has always been a motivating factor for all of us because it plays on the greatest human fear, I think. To me, the greatest human fear is being alone.
Mhm.
And so, if I promise you that you will be alone, not only in this life, but for eternity,
Right.
uh, or you will be together in union, in community for eternity, which one are you going to lean towards?
Yeah.
It's a very powerful motivation. Maybe that's what to go back to the old man and the reason why he's saying what he's saying, the forgetfulness or whatever. Maybe his experience of heaven and hell and how he got there throughout his life is the most meaningful thing to him, and he needs to keep telling that story. I
Wow.
need you to know this. I need you to know this. Because this is what I learned very painfully. I bled for this. I bled because of this. I lost my soul for this. I gained my soul in this. And I need you to know this. The passing on of wisdom throughout the ages. Maybe that's why he keeps telling that story. He needs to. Because he caught a piece of the profound truth of his reality. It was no longer subjective. It's been objectively true.
Look at Jesus. If you want to look at John Bevere makes this statement that um, I think he mentioned some of the growth in churches in Brazil, and when he was asking the pastors like what their church growth plan was, and yeah, or whatever. I mean, it wasn't that in those words, but what happened? Like, what do you attribute to that? Their statement was that we teach heavily on eternity, um, and and I think um, when you look at Jesus as an example, Hebrews talks about how Jesus recognized as his motivator, he saw the eternal joy, and for that reason, he persevered. Um, and I think there's been a lot of distortions of this, but there's a very healthy way of recognizing the possibility of eternal union, fellowship, and also the translation of that in part, in some capacity, into the here and now.
Right.
That that's what gives that's what gave the martyrs the the strength
Hmm.
to make it through.
Yeah. It reminds me of that little vignette, that piece. You know, Jesus is teaching and he makes a statement, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part in the kingdom. A very offensive way of putting things in Orthodox Jewish community. Very offensive. And everybody walks away pretty much. And he turns to his disciples and says, hey, you guys gonna walk away too? And Peter, being Peter, goes, where are we gonna go? We've seen too much. We've heard too much. We know too much. We know who you are. We don't understand this. I'm interpreting, obviously. We don't understand this, but we can't walk away from what we've seen and what we know. And I think that in that, there's such a faith that even though my senses deceive me and my context, my ego, my flesh, my sarx, like rebels against what you're saying, I've seen too much. I've had too many experiences with you that I just can't walk away.
Yeah.
Like in that moment, um, there's that quote that for those who have experienced this sickness called Jesus, there is no cure.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to that point, and I think it's only through these valleys of the shadow of death, and you've seen what he does in the midst of that, in you, in others, in the world, like you just can't walk away from it. You just can't. Like I've talked with thousands of people over the years, many of them struggling with their faith, whether God exists or whether he doesn't, or how this plays out, all everything, very human interactions. And they'll sometimes ask me, like, have you ever questioned the existence of God? And my honest, true answer is never once. I never once questioned whether God exists or if he was good. For me, the struggle was, am I good enough for him?
Mm,
That's always been my struggle. Never once have I questioned whether he exists because I've seen too much.
right.
I've experienced too much from the earliest ages. And so, no, I could never walk away. Mine was always a worthiness question.
Mm,
Have I earned it? Can I earn it? Am I capable? It was always about me. And thank God that shifted, over the last 15, 20 years, slowly but surely. But that truth was never in doubt for me. And I'm not saying that as some badge of honor. I'm just saying that's my experience.
right.
And I totally understand people who haven't had that experience, who are in the place where they question whether God is good or if he exists at all. One of my closest friends, dearest friends, was raised in a church system that if I said it, everybody would know what I was talking about. Went to school there, um, church, all that kind of stuff, and saw what was going on, saw behind the scenes, saw the reality of human beings and religion. and wants nothing to do with it.
Mhm.
He would call himself an agnostic now. Um, and the thing that struck me over the years that I've known him, it's been pretty close to a decade, um, is he's the most Christ-like, one of the most Christ-like people that I know. So kind, so giving, so loving. In times where like I was at rock bottom, like he was there and he would just listen and would show up again and again and again when everybody else had walked away. Like he was there. And to me, it's like he's had a different experience. He's had an experience with church. He's had an experience with God. He's had all these experiences, and it's led him into this place of I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. And I get it. I understand it. But in that place where you've been so affected by your experiences and you see God there, you can't walk away.
I think one of the darkest places you can find yourself in is around these people who have these brilliant stories of, I mean, you can fill in the blanks with anything you want, miraculous stories of any kind. The sense of knowing that Jesus is real, that he's there, that, you know, other types of, miraculous financial provision or like things coming in at the right second, last second, and
Yeah,
somebody getting healed of, I mean, I've seen people getting healed of physical ailments and other things like that. And then there's the rest of the world. And it's a really dark place to be sitting on the outside. And it's like, I want to celebrate and I want to believe that they're experiencing God in whatever way they are. But it becomes personal. Like, what about me? And I think one of the darkest places is being around the light, but not feeling like you can, not knowing, not experiencing the light, not participating in it. And not, I don't see that as any kind of judgment. I mean, there's no, it's like, and it's worse because you know that it'd be easier if you knew that this was just your choice, but it feels so utterly outside of your control.
right.
And then that's where the questions start. Has God forgotten me?
Yeah. And I think we get, because of our fear, I think we get very shaming in those moments. How could you walk away? How could you question? How could you? Yeah. Have you read the Psalms?
Yeah.
Have you read David crying out, how long, Lord? How long are you going to depart from me? How long until this is over? When are you going to bring justice? Like, these are very human experiences. But sometimes there is no answer. And to your point from the beginning, I think it's those moments where the fantasies become really, really powerful. Well, I had this time with God, and He told me this morning that this was going to happen. Okay. I'm not saying He did or He didn't. That's up to you. That's purely your experience. And I'm with you walking through this, whatever comes with you. But is that a fantasy or is that reality? And only time will tell.
Only time will tell, and only the fine tuning, even only walking that out in some capacity will tell us. I think
Yeah.
something else that's a very compassionate view is that if God really is the person that your friend saw behind the curtain, if that's really God, then that is a God that's perfectly worthy of not being believed in. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think there's a lot of times when people view agnosticism as this big enemy, and let's start very clearly by defining terms. Let's start by defining the God that we don't believe in, first and foremost. And we might actually discover that we're far closer to the agnostic than we in terms of belief and faith, or what we don't believe in, than we are to the actual
Yeah. We're
person.
far closer than we'd like to admit.
More, well, yes.
Yeah. Rob Bell in one of his books talks about he was having a conversation with some people who weren't believers, and they were having a conversation about God, and they started describing what they couldn't believe about God, and it struck him in that moment. He said, I don't believe that about God either.
Hmm.
That's not God as I know him. And they saw this connection start to happen. Oh wow, like this is what we our experience. I can't believe in a God that is like this. And the other goes, I can't believe in that God either. I can't believe in a God that's harsh and judgmental and condemning, because I've spent the entirety of my life studying this Jesus character in any method that I could. Scripture, of course, books, videos, studies, everything. I've spent 50 years studying this Jesus. And when something comes across my table that tells me who Jesus is, and my I start to react physically to that, I have to say that's not who I know him to be.
So is
Does
it
that make
possible?
me an atheist or a heretic? Maybe,
Maybe. Um,
maybe.
Jesus came down really hard on the people who were hypocritical, which hypocrisy is nothing more than an inability, unwillingness to embrace truth and reality. And and here's the what if. What if the agnostic is the one? So the person who is agnostic in their beliefs has a choice. They can say, I don't know. And I don't think I believe in that God, but I don't know. And they can stop. So they have that choice to stop the quest for truth. But it can also be an invitation into a journey. And perhaps they're closer to admitting the reality of where they're at and their understanding of the world than I mean, certainly more than what Jesus called the hypocrites, which I have parts of my life where that's me. Um, and 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 I think the question really is more than anything else. It goes back to your statement about asking, seeking, and knocking. The invitation exists if that's where you're at. Are you willing to continue asking? Are you willing to continue seeking? Are you willing to continue knocking? Are you willing to still make as as painful as the journey may have been, are you willing to not give up on the truth and to continue searching whatever that might be, wherever that may lead, knowing that if the God that you and I have experienced is real, then he's more than capable to let that turn into a found reality for you. And it's not imposing a timeline on it. It's just saying, it's just admitting the I don't know, but I'm willing to go on this journey to find what truth actually is. And that to me is a heart that, I mean, that's such a powerful posture to be in.
Yeah, yeah. I remember listening to a video or maybe it was audiobook, I can't remember, but Jordan Peterson was talking about he made this decision somewhere in his late teens, early 20s. Um, he, by his own admission, was going down the wrong path, drinking a lot, all that kind of stuff. And he decided at some point that he was going to make his life about like the search for truth. What is true? And wherever I find it, wherever I see it, whether I experience it, like I'm going to collect those truths. And to me, that is the gospel. It's a pursuit of the truth. That's the pursuit of Jesus. I fully believe at the end of any honest journey, any honest pursuit, you will find the truth, and the truth is Him.
Yeah.
I just think that we get scared by the journey.
Yeah.
And could this lead me astray? And well, if you have an honest heart and you truly want to know, yeah, you're going to experience some catastrophic situations. Of course you will. You're a human being. It's the nature of this world. But if you persist in the search of the truth, you're going to find Jesus because He is the truth. John tells us that everything was made through Him. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Logos, the truth.
Yeah.
But why can't we give people space to pursue the truth? That's the question.
I mean, but in many ways, I mean, this jumps back to the eternal destination. I need to jump in. I need to play God. I'm fearful of your eternal destination. I don't know how to hold relationship with you without letting that fear overpower the relationship. And and I need you to make specific choices because to me that's I need you to stop questioning and just jump to the conclusion because I have confidence in the conclusion, and the only way I have confidence in your eternal destination is in that conclusion.
But if you're so confident in the conclusion, why the argument?
So go jumping back to the story, the reason the scenario two, where the person was very direct with these are the facts. I don't hate you. I'm not mad at you. I but I need you to understand that if these things continue as they are in this situation, in this state, this will be the outcome. When that's based on reality, that is incredibly persuasive. That is incredibly persuasive. And to your point, I don't think there's for people who are the more you live in the fantasy world, the more easily you're persuaded by fantasy.
Hmm?
And it is work to pull people out of fantasy into reality. Or sometimes it's patience to let reality catch up with them. That's probably actually more frequently what it is.
Yeah,
But there are a few things that are as persuasive as the truth
right.
because there's something so grounding when you, even if the truth is there's a brick wall and it's going to hurt, and if you keep running in that direction, you're going to run into it and it's going to hurt really badly. If you keep running and you run into it and it hurts badly, it reinforces, yes, there's a wall there, and that's reality. And there's something that's oddly grounding about that.
Right.
One of the things
I've
that,
had an issue with apologetics for a number of decades now. And it's based on a specific question. If you have to defend your God, how small is that God that He needs you to defend Him? I don't have the time nor the inclination. to defend God. A, because I don't think he needs me to defend him. B, because I wouldn't do a very good job of it. I would rather live with God. Walk that out step by step. Let him teach me and allow him to do the same for others. There was somebody asked me to come guest speak at a apologetics seminar kind of thing. And entertaining the idea, I was like, what would you like me to talk about? And they gave me the topic. And I said, I can't do that. Well, why can't you do that? Because I don't believe in it. How could you not believe in this? I just don't. It's not how I see the world. It just it just wouldn't fit for me to be there. Now, is there value in it? Maybe for some people. I don't know. Certainly there is, because there's an entire cottage industry that's developed around apologetics. There are seminars and books and teachers and college programs and all that kind of stuff. And I have nothing ill to say about those who go down that path by any stretch of the imagination. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, there has to be an openness to both sides of a debate, for the lack of a better term, around embracing the truth. Like the goal is not to win the argument; the goal is to find the truth. Um, and fun little side note, since we've talked about sales and marketing, there's a guy who's developed an entire philosophy around selling, and his one of his statements that he makes, it's Ari Galper is the guy, and he says the point is not to make the sale, the point is to get to the truth, and the truth will always make the sale. I mean, if it's for the right thing for the right person, like no duh, like okay, great, like, and that's revolutionary in the sales world, unfortunately.
Right.
But so there's debate for the sake of getting to the truth. But I had an experience this past week where I was in a conversation with somebody who wasn't really, I walked out of the conversation and felt like I'd been absolutely grilled to pieces and dissected, taken apart, interrogated. I don't know what the term is. And I mean, the good news is that I felt like I held better to my sense of reality than I probably ever have in that type of a situation. But it was very disconcerting and very disorienting. And it did not feel like this was a conversation in which we were going after the truth. It felt like there was an agenda. And I feel like the problem most times with debate is that there's that people have there's something else that people want out of the debate besides truth. They want, as long as there's an openness to learn on both sides, it can work. But otherwise, some people just love the process of arguing,
Right.
coming up with
And
sophisticated.
you
Go ahead.
said, sorry, you said the openness to truth, and I think that goes back to the humility we were talking about. In a conversation, if you have the desire to learn, you can have a conversation with anybody and you can go anywhere with that. But the absolute arrogance around, I'm going to step into this space and I'm going to prove that I'm right and I'm going to dominate you because I have the ability to, or whatever the case may be. Like it's just ridiculous. I was at this is the Rob Bell version of the podcast today. I was at a event that he was doing and got like VIP tickets. So there was like a meet and greet before you could ask questions and that kind of thing. And that was right about the time that the podcast about Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill was out, and it was really big. And there was actually people in the crowd who were interviewed on that podcast and who like were asking questions. I was utterly fascinated. And at a certain point, Mark Driscoll had issued this challenge to Rob Bell that he would debate him. It was right after shortly after Rob had released Love Wins, which was his death knell to the evangelical church, and had issued this challenge to debate him, and Rob was never really interested. And they asked him, "Why were you not interested?" He goes, and he answered. He said, "Why would I go into that environment?" He's like, "That's not going to be a conversation. That's going to be a prize fight." He's like,
Mhm.
"He's going to come in with his knives out, looking to stab somebody." I don't see that as the kingdom of heaven. I don't see that as the person of Jesus. I don't see that as being productive in the slightest. And he was like, to be brutally honest, I don't know. I don't like what it would do to me in that situation. That I would, the base part of me, the worst part of me, the animal instinct within me could take over in that moment. It's like, I don't want to give that part of me any audience like that. It's like the absolute arrogance of, we're going to debate this. And I honestly have no problem with debate at all, as long as it's based on curiosity and we're both looking for the truth. But most debates are not like that. Most debates are a ego manifestation of, I'm right, you're wrong. Everybody can see it. Okay. Look at the presidential debates. The last one that we had, where Trump was talking to Biden, and that poor guy was just clearly not all there. And like, my heart was breaking for him. I could only watch like 5 minutes of it, then I was done. But like, Trump walked away from that going like, yeah, I won. Okay, come on. Like, does that make you feel better? Or do you feel better about yourself? Like, I no,
No.
no.
Well, what I found in this. Well, I mean, that whole thing is an ego manifestation for to playing to the ego of the people who need some kind of, it's ego to ego, like to win the ego popularity contest because of people who need that to be identified with that. Well, one of the things about my conversation this week that was so utterly both empowering and also simultaneously frustrating is that I would repeatedly lay out the facts. Here's the facts. Here is why this didn't work. Here's the problem with it. Okay, well, what about this? Okay, well, I, I've thought about that, and you sound like this utter Debbie Downer. Like, are you just this massive pessimist? Like when you're
Right.
saying that, it's like, here's this optimistic idea. Like, let's go do this. Here's this vision. Like, well, okay, sure. Now let's break it down. Then part of the conversation was, well, why don't we just go do this? Well, okay, let me break it down. So step one is going to take 1 to 2 weeks, and then it's going to take another, 2 to 3 weeks after that, and then another 2 weeks after that. For that part of the outcomes, the entire thing is a 2 month time frame, and you're looking for something that you can just pull the trigger and have it instantly. Great. I'm not saying that's a bad path. You just can't, like, it's not
That's the
logic.
way things work.
Logic does not, and time is not on your side. Like, this doesn't, like, you can't just, I mean, I'm not Jesus.
So in that point, you were the turd in the punch bowl.
I really was.
Everybody's having a party, going over to get some punch, and all of a sudden you recognize, oh wow, there's something off with the punch. And I find, and this may be somewhat sacrilegious for me to say this, but I think it's actually true. I find that Jesus quite often is the turd in the punch bowl for people.
There's the title
Like,
of your
I,
new book and the new t-shirt.
right? I find that, like, we can get really, it doesn't matter if you're religious, you're secular, whatever you come from, agnostic, atheist, it doesn't matter. You start talking about things, you start sharing truth, and then, like, you bring up this Jesus character, and everything he said was so antithetical to human systems and human logic that he just ends up being like this stumbling block. Like scripture tells us, this is the stone you stumble over.
Hmm.
And that's the reality of it. That's great. You have all these plans, and you have all these prophecies, and you have all these, ideas, and these methodologies, and then, okay, what about Jesus? What does he say about this?
Right.
Oh, well, he meant this, or he meant this, or he meant this. Okay. I mean, something that we could have a dialogue about, something we could talk about. But he ends up to me being the stumbling block, the fly in the ointment.
Well, and I don't know what your experience has been. My experience has been is that first of all, the process of getting there is incredibly painful. But then even once you're there, it's like there's a cleansing that happens. Like there's a I don't know how to describe it for me, but for the way it feels to me is just being cleaner on the inside. I don't know how else to describe it. And it doesn't he doesn't stop being offensive. Like he's always taking us into places where you're like, I mean, I mentioned this is not the kind of person I want to be. Can I not just choose? Like, why did you give me this? Like, this is why did you wire me like this? This is really okay. Like, logically, let's break it down logically just for fun.
Yeah.
Why is the clay telling the potter you're an idiot? Like, that's just okay. But that's in reality what's happening. And very honest,
You
I don't know
don't know what
Moses'
you're doing.
thoughts. You don't know what you're
Yeah.
doing. So he's continually confronting, continually offensive. But the beauty of it is that as you go on this journey with him, the pruning actually makes it easier. And I think one of the things that isn't talked about enough is the pruning that happens with following Jesus. Jesus talked about it. So why does it surprise us? Um, One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, well, let me share maybe my experience is that as I've made truth in reality, embracing truth in reality, and the search for it a priority, and union with him a priority, I've found certain relationships just going sideways. Um, and I'm not trying to destroy them. It's just maybe it's as simple as how can two walk together unless they be agreed, unless we can have a dialogue until not even agreement. Can we just converse? Can we communicate? So there can be a pruning of friendships where you realize, or maybe it's not even a pruning, it's just recognizing I thought this relationship had depth, and now when I actually understand depth, it's not there. And what I was hoping to get out of this relationship, I'm actually not going to be able to get. And and
Not gonna
and
happen.
but on the flip side, there's certain friends who've walked this type of a journey, and I you can tell they've gone through this, and they too, they're willing to share truth. They're willing to embrace truth, but it might be worth talking a little bit about how this pursuit affects friendships and the relationships that we have around us, because it can be a very painful part of the experience.
Very painful. Very painful. I think when ego gets involved, as it always does with human beings, that there's going to be certain points that you reach that you just don't agree on. In the kingdom, we cannot agree and we can love each other and we can respect each other. But in this world, there's going to be times where you don't agree, and that means we cannot be together. And it is tragic and it happens. So for me, like I will go 1,000 miles with somebody if there's an openness to conversation and there's a dialogue that happens. But the second that it gets to the place where it's divisive and there's gossiping and there's rumors and there's backbiting, that kind of stuff, I'll just walk away. I've been accused on many occasions of just going silent and ghosting people. And what I'll say to them is, and I certainly have done that in the past, without a doubt. What I'll say to people is, there was no dialogue to be had. There was no conversation to be had. I believe this. This is how I'm approaching this. And you believe this. And this is how you're approaching this. And you didn't respect my viewpoint. In fact, you continually tried to hammer away to get me to see things your way. And I'm just not interested in that. Now, if that makes me a bad person, okay, great. That's fine. But I'm not into that.
Right.
But I will walk years and years and years with somebody that I disagree with as long as it can be respectful and honoring and about union. Of course, no problem
Right.
whatsoever. My closest friend, for that I described earlier, we fundamentally disagree on the nature of reality, and yet we are always in dialogue. We always have curious conversations. We're always interested in what each other is doing, and he would take a bullet for me, and I would take a bullet for him, hands down, no question. That's to me, that's my example of what the kingdom looks like. But there are some times where we're not going to agree. Okay, can we do that respectfully? Awesome. Then we can remain in relationship. But if not, we can't remain in relationship. I wish you the best. Not
Yeah.
angry at you, don't hate you, none of that kind of stuff. But we just can't be in relationship. And I think that's the most tragic thing in our world.
Well, that's such a tough shift to make because I was my most familiar environment was up until the last, really honestly, the last number of years has been one where it's been all relationship has been largely contingent upon agreement.
Right.
And the problem with that is that the very, okay, if you have a model where relationship is contingent upon agreement, the very act of saying, I want relationship based on dialogue and not agreement, that is a disagreement. And they're like most fundamentally, which I wanted, I, okay, let's talk about denying reality. For years, I denied the reality of like, if I hold this value, then I can be in this group here and I can influence change.
Yeah.
But no, like there's no, not unless there's an openness to dialogue, which fundamentally, if it's all about agreement, then it means there is no openness to dialogue. And so it's oil and water. And that was a very painful embrace of reality to say, I, I want it to be true.
Yeah.
And yet I couldn't make it be true. And I think making that switch, if you've been in a world, whether it's political, whether it's religious, whether it's any other type of scenario, if you've been in a world where the predominant unifying factor is agreement, then you have the choice. Are you going to keep the relationship or are you going to change what matters most in a relationship?
Right. And I think you just clarified exactly like the point I was sloppily trying to make before. Like when it gets to that point where your demand is for this relationship is based on agreement, I'm out. Because we just aren't going to agree. To me, that's the dividing line.
But then you also have to look beyond the verbal and look into the behavioral because in the conversation I described this week, the conversation very much was around it was this almost this bizarre, man. I'm processing some of these situations live on the air, guys. Not recommended.
Yes.
Yes, Kevin's like, yay. Um, because there was this assent of like, no, of course you don't have to follow my direction. And yet what I felt, my felt experience in that was was yes, you do. Like, and in addition, the expectation was around, um, man, I don't know if I can tease this apart in a way that makes sense. Um, there were explanations for for why the dialogue, the interrogation what felt to me like an interrogation was explained to me as an attempt to understand, but it didn't feel like an attempt to understand. It felt like an interrogation.
Right.
So this is where things start getting tricky because you can't, for those of us who love to live in the realm of reason, and we love to believe that what people say is actually, whether intended or not, is an exact one-to-one to their
Right.
motives. How do you deal with that? The separation between you can say it better. I think you get where I'm going after. What I'm going after.
Yeah. Well, the thing that popped up into my mind, like, as you were talking about that scenario, was the Jesus's temptation in the desert. It's like, bow to me and I will give you all these things. And I wonder how often in these situations is one or the other asking for a position of power and dominance and authority and asking you to bow to them and then promising, if you do this, this is what you will get.
I am your Lord and I am your Savior, and I will give you eternity in heaven if you bow, you know, bow your head or bend the knee, bow your head.
I've had numerous situations like that in my life. And for whatever reason, probably arrogant, purely arrogant, probably a continuum, purely arrogant in the beginning, purely ego driven. I'm not bound to anybody. And then increasingly more, no, I bow to only one. But there's been times where, like, I have had people look me in the eye and say, like, for all intents and purposes, bow to me and I will give you all these things. And I'll say no. And I've had people literally say, you're going to end up in hell. And that scared me the first time I heard it. I had to wrestle with that. I think I was probably 19 or 20 the first time I heard that. I had to wrestle with then tease it apart and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like, okay, all right. I know my heart. I know what I'm pursuing. I know to the best of my ability, not perfectly by any stretch of the imagination, I am going after Jesus, trying to see how wide and deep and expansive that love is. And if that lands me in hell, okay, that's fine. And that statement really freaks people out because it doesn't have the power that they expect it to.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's such a and I mean, but isn't that where faith starts? Like, I am going to pursue him to the best and to know him to the best of my ability, my human finite ability. And faith, by definition, is saying the only thing I can control is the pursuit, and
That's
my
it.
eternal outcome is in the hands of an almighty God.
Yeah.
Or is and if you really like, yeah. The fascinating thing saying talking about the bow to me, one of the comments that came up in the conversation was this comment, and that sounds like I'm painting this person in just a terrible light. This, in my opinion, is a person in an unfortunate circumstance that you know I think brings out the worst. And like I would hate to paint this, you know, there you go. That's the simple. We all find ourselves in situations that are challenging. Um, it's very interesting that you talk about this idea of bowing because the one of the comments or one of the observations that came up was that I end up looking that this is the other person's perspective of me is that I'm like somebody else that they know who doesn't like to be put in a box, resists being put in the box. And in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, well, first of all, you just put me in a box by doing that. That's really interesting. And and then second of all is like, I don't know that that's true. I hope it's not true. Maybe it is true. There's probably a part that's true, but I don't like being put in a box that's not real. Like I've thought about these things. And if you can introduce new information, new evidence, and not just rational facts, like experiential facts, sure, I'm fine with that. Like if you can, I'm not looking to be closed-minded and even beyond personal experience, but can you introduce something into my situation, a perspective, an insight, something, then it's absolutely reasonable that I come to a different conclusion and I follow a different path. But as things are, that hasn't happened yet, and so just the fact that I'm not willing to bend from truth to reality doesn't inherently mean that it, do I have trouble bowing? Sure, apparently, but maybe because we're not bowing to the same thing. I want to bow to the truth. I want to bow to reality. And it sounds to me in this moment that you're not. And I trust that individual will come to the place. I hope they will come to the place where they have the capability to do that. And it may be, again, a journey of circumstance. Just a very fascinating turn of events. There's something else that really I wanted to touch on with this as well that really struck me this past week. There's a lot of talk between truth and love, that you need both. And as I was thinking about this week, it's not that you need both, it's that they are both. Because
Say,
truth,
how do you separate the two?
tr truth that is not truth that is not kind means that it must be truth with an agenda. And if it's truth with an agenda, it means that by definition, there must be some falsehood inside of it, which
Yes,
means by definition, it's not truth, it's a lie.
right.
And I've been told many times throughout my life that I need to believe things that are unkind because it's true, and never could find the rational answer. Never sat right. I was like, that's just bonkers. But never had the framework for myself in such a way to at least even know for myself, like to know what to make of it, to know how to think about it.
Yeah. It reminds me of some of the interactions that Jesus has with religious leaders or political leaders, calling the Pharisees whitewashed tombs or, unwashed cups. The outside looks pretty, but the inside is just wretched and nasty. Or when they come talking to him, Herod issues a warning or something, and Jesus looks at him and says, "You tell that fox that I would got 3 days of work to do," that kind of thing. And calling somebody a fox was probably in that culture was probably the worst characterization you could give them. Sneaky, manipulative, all those kinds of things. Like, so he does have those kind of conversations, and so was that kind? I think so. I think he's pointing out what's going on in their lives. Was it nice? No, no,
Right.
not at all. But let's get to this idea, especially within the church, that nice is a psychological disorder.
Preach.
Nice is people pleasing.
Yes.
Nice is tailoring your remarks for who's in your audience. Nice is deceptive.
Yeah.
There's a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it's written specifically by a therapist, written for men, talking about this problem of niceness and people pleasing. And it became wildly successful because it almost gave permission for people to be kind, to tell the truth in as loving and compassionate a way as you can, but to tell the truth. And there's just a vast difference between the two. Jesus was not a nice guy, he was kind. And we are to follow in his footsteps. So we are not called to be nice guys, curate this public persona, have everybody think well of us. It's not what we're called to.
So I have a question. So kindness is, I think, can be as simple as conforming to reality and the truth. A truth to be considered, and I'm curious how you think about applying this. A truth to be considered is, what is someone's openness to the truth at some level? We can't gauge everything. And in what is their stage of development? Where are they at developmentally? And I don't mean age, I just mean developmentally in this context, in this scenario, where are they at developmentally? And again, we don't have a full window of that. At what point is the consideration of that people pleasing, trying to tailor your message to that? At what point is that the wisdom of understanding the reality of your situation? For example, don't teach matrices to a third grade math student, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there's a developmental appropriateness to it. And to me, it, it's not about levels of maturity. It's about curiosity.
Mm.
Are you curious? Do you have questions? Do you want to know? Okay, that's something we can work with. And there's developmentally appropriate stages for that, of course. But are you curious? Do you want to know? And if you want to know, we can see how high and deep and wide and everything the expansive nature of God is. But when you lose that curiosity, you're stuck. You're not moving. And the lack, to me, the lack of curiosity in an individual is directly proportional to the strength with which they're holding on to something, some idea, some concept, some heart need. The harder they're holding on to it, the less curious they are. The more curious they are, the more things they've let go.
Wow.
We've, not
They-
all of us.
I hope this is true. My wife was telling me last night, yeah, you're probably going to be this when you get to be an old, grandpa. You're probably going to be this guy, and your kids are telling you about this random thing they're doing at work or in business and whatever, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's so interesting! Like, tell me more." And she's like, and you'll probably throw them some other random idea in there that they could use to improve upon it and build upon it and make it better. And I'm like, I hope that's the case.
Yeah,
I hope to stay pliable, open to the truth. And I think, and, you know, I think you've laid out the path. How do you get there? Well, you get there surprisingly, not surprisingly, by laying down self-protection, pursuing union, walking into the dark places, the hard places, embracing pain. All of the stuff that we're talking about is the foundation that leads to an open, curious life in the pursuit of truth.
yeah. And I think what stops most people, because I think we all know the path on some level within inside us. We all know to one degree or another. I think what stops most of us is the fear of the pain.
Mm.
Because there will be blood. There will be. Whether it's from you falling down, scraping your knees and your hands, or it's you taking a head wound, or like there will be blood. And I think that's what stops most of us.
Well, it's like the classic kid at the doctor, and the doctor's counting one, two, gives the injection, three, done. It's like
Right.
if you can sneak in the injection at count two before they're expecting it, the anticipation, to your point, sometimes the anticipation of the pain is worse than the pain itself.
In my experience, anticipation of the pain has been exponentially worse than the pain itself. exponentially worse. There's seasons that I've walked through where I was like, this is going to kill me, but I know I have to walk through this. And strangely, at the end, I mean, I'm sitting here telling the story, so it didn't kill me.
Didn't kill you.
It's painful. There was blood, but it didn't kill me. In fact, I feel like I'm stronger because of the experience.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that that's the reality of truth is if we can avoid it, we will. But we can only do that for so long. And the longer we avoid it, the closer to death we come. And the more we embrace it, the more full of life we become.
Yeah.
It's like I have this friend, known him for 15, 20 years. He was deathly afraid of the ocean. Pools, no problem. Water, it wasn't water per se, it was the ocean. He'd go to the beach with his family. He'd go up to his knees, but even that was a big deal. And a number of years ago, he's telling me this story, and he went out on this day fishing boat, out into the ocean. And he's telling me this story, and I'm trying not to react because everything inside me is like, what happened? And he's telling me the whole story, and he wraps up, and I go, wow, that sounds like a cool experience. Like, can I ask a question? And he goes, yeah, of course. And before I got it out of my mouth, he said, how was I able to go out on the water in this boat? I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I've been wondering as you've been talking. And he talks about how he had this experience with some friends. They had taken this inflatable boat with a motor on it out to cruise the harbor, and how he was so nervous and anxious about it. And I was like, well, what made you go? And he goes, there was a girl. The girl was what his motivating factor was. And he's like, but the amazing thing was that was the motivator. But then I got out there and I got wrapped up in conversation, that kind of stuff. And like, it just seemed to be foolish to me. The
Mm.
fear of the water, the fear of the ocean. And he's like, something broke in that moment. He's like, I can't explain why, I can't explain how. It just did. And I think that that's the kind of situations that it takes for us to overcome our fears. There has to be a very good reason for us to confront it. And then once we have that good reason, there's still pain in the choice, but the fear of missing out on this good reason overcomes the fear of the water per se. So it's like aversion therapy. You're afraid of spiders, go to a spider farm and see, whatever the case may be. Go to Africa for a little while and see those spiders and then, desensitize yourself. But maybe that's what it's like. Have to experience the pain to recognize that, yeah, it was hard, but it didn't kill us. That's been my experience over and over and over again. Things that I was so vastly afraid of, and then I would avoid by all costs. But God, in His grace, provided me opportunities where I had to come face to face with it and confront it. And then, okay, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Well, fun going looking for the experience, but it wasn't that bad. I
Which I
survived.
think you survived, which I think is a beautiful tie back all the way back to the beginning. The hope of the future is the thing that allows us to override the pain of escaping fantasy. The true hope of the future
True hope. Yeah. Of
is
union, of
of the union.
oneness. Yeah.
Yes. is what gives us the pain tolerance to escape
Right.
fantasy. And and going back to your apologetics comment, for people to get a taste, because I feel like much of that honestly came from, I mean, when you think of the accusation of Christians, it's been of being little Christs. And I think one of the biggest things for me was in many of our conversations, I I didn't have words for what it was, but there was a safety in our conversations that I didn't experience elsewhere. There was a knowing, there was a curiosity, there was all of that. And uh, this was just my experience. There was a transferability of some sort at which some point it became clear that this is more than just a blueprint for human relationships. This is foggy mirror, perhaps because we're human, and not denying that. But this is a mirror of what union with Christ looks like. And I think
Yeah.
perhaps the best the best evangelism that we can do. This is wow. I'm trying to wind us down, and I'm just like pulling it all open again. But the best evangelism that we can do is to walk in union and engage with other people in an invitation to union. And there's something about the depth of that that to me just feels shattering to so many of the defenses, and a calling card to the people who are crying out for that.
Yeah.
It almost my friend uses the term dog whistle. It's almost like a dog whistle for the people who are hungry and ready for the gospel.
Yeah.
And so,
We're
wow,
hungry and ready to be loved
yes,
by the biblical definition of it,
by the biblical
to be
definition.
known. I there's a guy. I've lived in this house for going on 5 years, and there's a 7-Eleven like a 10-minute walk from my house, real close. And there's a gentleman that hangs out in front of that 7-Eleven. He's there quite regularly. And for the first year, I would see him and I'd recognize him, but just didn't necessarily have a conversation with him for whatever reason. And then after that first year, I just felt this like compelled need to just talk to him, see who he is. They see him all the time. So here or there, just like, hey, how's your day going? You know, and it just developed into this conversation. And this guy was so lonely. If I could have stayed there for 3 hours, he would have talked for 3 hours. And sometimes I'd stay an hour, sometimes it was 10 minutes, sometimes it was just, hey, how you doing? Kind of thing. But over time, like I just came to see that he just wanted to be known and understood, and he had never felt that in his life. And it just required listening. There was no fixing that was happening. There was no magical cure. There was nothing to end his homelessness or his whatever. It was just being known. And to this day, still, like I have those conversations with him, not because I'm trying to fix him, not because I can fix him, because I can't, but simply because he's a human being in front of me that for whatever reason, God brought us to that place at that time to have these conversations.
Right.
And that's the end of the story for me. That's what evangelism looks like. Did you
Yeah.
convert him? No, I can't convert anybody. That's the Holy Spirit's job. The best thing I can do is share with you what it's like to be me in relationship with Jesus. That's the best I can do. And then you get to decide.
Yeah.
That's it. To me, that's evangelism. That's the gospel.
There's a lot there. And there are some people that will walk out what that looks like to be. Some people walk that out in a bookish, studious, introverted way. Some people analytical way, an emotional way, and an extroverted way. There's billions of ways in which that can be lived out.
Yeah.
And each of those are capable of sharing this reality of what it is in a different way to different people. And there's a trust that God can orchestrate that. I, I do have one question out of that. And if you want to table this for the next conversation, I'm fine with that. How did you have to detox from the need to fix people? And if
Oh
so,
God.
all right, well, thank goodness I'm not the only one. And what did that
I think
detox?
this is sorry.
Go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I think this is a great topic for the next conversation because there is so much here. But I'll leave the cliffhanger for you.
Perfect.
Yes, and detoxing from that. I've never had this experience, but I could imagine it would be similar. Detoxing from that was a lot like detoxing from heroin. So if that's
All
not a
right, guys.
teaser for the next one,
Oh, I want to start this so bad. I just want to hit the anyway. We have places we need to be. We have things we got to do. I that's I shouldn't even have asked. I should not have opened my mouth because now it's going to be
right?
eating. I'm going to be thinking about this for
You're
the
never
next.
gonna week.
This is not good. All right. Well, um, thank you guys for listening. And we appreciate you going on the journey. As you can tell, these are sometimes they're very human, and I know in this time around, I talked a lot about my experience, some recent experiences, and Kevin in my heart is as much as we can to be honest about our own both abilities and inabilities, and our own places where we've learned lessons in our own shortcomings. And I really hope this doesn't, my intent here is not to be some kind of image of perfection of like, hey, I won one over this conversation or, whatever. Like these
No,
are me trying to sort through reality of these conversations. And I think it's something that we all face. So thank you guys for being part of this conversation, being part of our journey. And we are honored that you take the time to listen to our thoughts. We'd love to hear yours as well, because as we've talked about, dialogue is vastly important to us. And so we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for the chat, Kevin.
thank you. Till we meet again.
Till we meet again.